Okay, so I'm going to be making my first unboxing video. Not terribly fond of unboxing videos, but this one's going to be a little bit different, so I'm going to do it anyway. This is a Macintosh computer, mostly from the year 1984 when they first came out. If you remember the advertisement with the Orwellian theme to it. This was an original Macintosh. The original Macintosh actually underwent a modification shortly after its introduction, in which they changed a little bit on the motherboard. This is one before that change. Now, unfortunately, it's not the same Mac it used to be. Bits of it are, but since I bought it originally, I upgraded it. I converted it to a Mac Plus, which is sort of the third generation or whatever. They had the original Mac with 128K of RAM. Then they came up with the Fat Mac, which had, I think it was 512K of RAM. And they came up with the Mac Plus, which was a completely new motherboard, had 1 megabyte of RAM, and had a SCSI port, which the original one didn't have. And this one was upgraded to that, so the back panel and the motherboard were swapped out. Also, the original 400 kilobyte double-sided floppy drive was swapped for the Mac Plus 800 kilobyte double-sided floppy drive. So the only part that's original is the front part of the case and the CRT. The analog board was also swapped out because the original analog board couldn't handle the additional power drain from the Mac Plus motherboard, and so it burned out and got swapped out. So, but anyway, this is the original packing from the original one, so we can see what it would have been like to be living in 1984 and getting a brand new Macintosh back when the world was young. Okay, open it up, and got a little extra there. Oh, this is a little added thing. This didn't come with it. It's a fan that I bought that, who makes this? Kensington, that he sticks on the top and doesn't rely on the convective cooling, which didn't quite do the job when you upgraded it. I didn't want to replace another analog board, so I bought this too. So we'll pull this out, and everything's stuck in there. And it just sort of plugged in and cooled off the Mac. Alright, so you take it out, and you have a styrofoam container that has the original keyboard. So here's the keyboard. Very Spartan looking one, as you can see. The main keyboard that comes with it has no function keys or the specialty keys here or the numeric keypad, just alphabet, numeric, a few special characters and the usual tab and all that. Option and command. These were, as far as I know, this was Apple's own invention, the command key and the option key, as opposed to Alt and whatever they call that. 2 option keys, but only 1 command key, but we have an extra enter key down here, or that's the enter return, no delete key. But anyway, that's how it worked back then. Has a little slot here for the security device, which you'll see on the computer. And the connection was with a telephone handset type connector. It just plugged into here, and then the other end plugs into the computer. If you were hardcore, like I was back then, you could buy a separate numeric keypad. When I bought the machine, this was back ordered, so it took like a month to get this stupid thing, but it's just a numeric keypad for entering numbers, and again, the same connectors there. Okay, here's the original mouse. This is the mouse that came with the original computer. This is an original mouse from back in the days when mice had balls. And this mouse has a ball, as you can see, and it would get all covered with dirt and dust after you used it for a while, and you would have to spend part of your time washing mouse balls in order to keep your computer working. But, you know, you had to do what you had to do back then. And this thing had like a DB9 connector to connect it up to the computer. A special connector for it, just for the mouse. Didn't work with anything else. No USB ports back in 1984. And then we get to the machine itself. It comes packed in styrofoam. Here's the here's the keyboard connector. Again, it looks like a telephone connector, like a narrow one. So here's what the computer itself looks like. The standard old Macintosh beige. The front part here is original, as is the CRT. Just a little 9-inch monochromatic monitor. This is not the original floppy drive in here. Originally came with a 400 kilobyte single-sided floppy drive that has now been replaced with the one that was standard with the Mac Plus, which was a 800 kilobyte double-sided drive. Mouse connection here, brightness control over here, believe it or not, an actual potentiometer, and the air vents on either side, cooled by convection cooling, unfortunately, and the digital board, as it's called, is sitting on the bottom. And on one side, and for the life of me I forget which one it was, on one side, either here or here, there's the analog board which has the video circuitry and the power supply circuitry. And for that reason, one side would get hotter than the other, and the top corner of whichever side that was known as the devil's corner. Originally, no such thing as a hard drive. You had to run everything off your floppy, which is why pretty much everybody anybody who wanted to do anything serious bought an external floppy drive to double your space. I bought an original 400K external floppy drive. This is not it. I sold it when I upgraded. This is a 800K double-sided floppy drive like the one inside. Same general idea though. It plugs into this DB, whatever that is, connector. The floppy drives were somewhat innovative at the time in as much as they decided to increase the amount of storage on a tiny little disk by varying the speed of the platter turning. I don't know if you call it a platter, if it's a floppy, whatever, the disk. The disk would slow down when you were accessing the outer part of the disk and speed up when you're accessing the inner part of the disk, so that the linear velocity of the disk underneath the head was relatively constant. And it allows you to pack in more data. And that was kind of an innovative thing they did. And then on the back, you have your on-off switch, a little security thing there. Power goes in there, obviously. And then this is the connector for the external drive here. Mouse plugs in here, speaker here, and then your serial ports. No such thing as USB in 1984. We had two sort of proprietary Apple serial connectors here, and one's labeled with it for a modem and one's labeled for a printer. And that was all you had for serial ports. No Apple Talk back then either, but eventually you could plug in Apple Talk. And then this is something the original Mac didn't have. This is the SCSI port, small computer system interface port, which is really good. And it has this little thing here which you could optionally install. I'm not going to pull it out, I'll probably break it. But it's got a interrupt and reset button. This is the equivalent of Control-Alt-Delete. So you push that when you're locked up. Didn't have to do that as much because it wasn't running Windows. But people wouldn't necessarily install that. That was called a programmer switch for the people that were technically really savvy and knew how to do that. This Kensington device. How do I that in there. Well, anyway, that just fits on the top here. And you got a little power switch to turn your Mac on and off with, a little light there. And it has a fan, and it just pulls air through, so you're not relying on the convective cooling, which turned out to be not quite adequate for many things. Okay, back in 1984, your average person didn't have access to the internet. Back then, the best you could do would be something like CompuServe or The Source or Prodigy. Remember any of those services, which don't really exist anymore. So to connect up to these, you used a modem, an audio dial-up modem. Back in 1984, the best you could get at the time was a 1200 baud modem, which is about an order of magnitude slower than a modern dial-up modem, which is also antiquated. This is the original one that came with my original computer, and here it is. The modem itself is this enormous box, a modern day modem if you still have one. I've got one I use for sending faxes and things like that. It's about yay big. But that's the modem. I have a cable, a little extension cable on there, DB9 connector that connects up to the little data thing. Phone plugs in here. Plug your phone line into one side and your telephone the other. This was designed to sit on your desktop and have your desktop telephone sitting on top of it. If you're really old, it would be a rotary telephone. Here's the power supply for it. Standard issue. On-off switch. Power plugs in here. And some dip switches for setting some of the parameters of the modem. And that's how we talked to other computers at the time. Didn't have any local networking. Back then, the only network we had was what we called NikeNet. If you wanted to move something from one computer to another computer down the hall or whatever, you used NikeNet, which meant you wrote it onto a floppy disk or a tape drive or whatever medium you had, and then ran it physically over there to the other computer. If you wanted to print, it came with the image writer, which was sort of innovative. So here's the image. We can unbox this as well. This is the original image writer from 1984. The modem and the printer are original. So it comes with unpacking instructions. That obviously not where it belongs. Packing list. Oh, look at that little sample printout. Ooh, look at that high quality print. Printer evaluation report. Take a few minutes to complete this form. As soon as you've connected to, it's probably too late now. All right. So, comes with the standard old power cord, same one we do today. The serial cable. Well, it converts to a, my goodness, a different type of DB one. And here is the printer, all packed in styrofoam, just like they do nowadays, and hard as heck to get out. Just like a modern day printer. Man. Okay. I guess the way you do it is you turn it upside down. You don't have to worry too much about breaking it. I don't think you can hook it up on something if you try. Alright. So this is the original image writer. I don't know if I ever called it an image writer 1. Shortly thereafter, they had the image writer 2, which was an improved version. It's filthy. Alright. So this one, oh, I hate styrofoam. This was state of the art at the time. So this is the original printer that came with the original Macintosh. It's an image writer printer. It's I don't remember if they called it the Image Writer 1 at the time. There was a later one called the Image Writer 2. But this was a impact printer. No laser printers readily available back then to the home consumer market. and kind of worked like a typewriter. It has a roller that you can turn by hand, and these little pinch rollers that go up and down. You can release the paper and lock the paper in, feed it in like a typewriter, and use the ribbon. And the innovative thing about this is that the print head had a nice little matrix of pins that would impact and print on the paper. Other printers from that time, they'd use a daisy wheel, which is a little wheel that had all the letters of the alphabet and numbers and so on it. And you were kind of stuck with that font and that size and that set of characters. Whereas this could print anything, could print graphics. And back then, one of the nice innovations of the Mac was that the fonts, the typefaces were just part of the graphics. So it was all done in software, and you could have different fonts and different font sizes and do all kinds of crazy stuff. And the pens would print, were spaced at a certain distance. I don't remember if it was 72 per inch or something like that. But the nice thing about it is that you could offset the position of the head by half of half of the distance between the pins. So you could increase your resolution on the page by going over it once with the print head, and then going over it a second time with the print head offset by half a pixel, and you could sort of fill in the dots between the other dots and double your resolution, which again was a relatively new concept at the time. Has the power switch select, which I think what would happen is you turn it on, but computer wouldn't see it until you push the select button. Not sure why they did that. Has a line feed button that will move it ahead by one line, and a form feed which would eject one page, which again harkens back to the old impact printers. And the connections are back here, and we have the usual power connector, fuse, and another DB25 or whatever connector for the serial connection there. And that's the image writer. And that's how we did things back in 1984. And the other thing I got there is old magazine McWorld, which I guess is all online now, but it used to be print. And this is the premiere issue with Steve Jobs looking very pleased with himself there. 3 identical Macintoshes there just to make a real impact. I had a company that made candy apple stuff, they called it. It was accessories for your Mac. Accessorize all the bling that goes with it, all the stuff in there. And it just talks about what little software was available. It was the only thing that came with this when I bought it was MacWrite and MacPaint, which was pretty good even of themselves, but then later they came up with Multiplan, which was the original spreadsheet software, and then a separate program called Chart, which would chart your spreadsheets, later combined into Excel, and a few other things available. So that's it. So that's what it's like to unbox the very first Macintosh from 1984. And if you ever hope to do this, I wouldn't hold your breath, because there probably ain't too many people that are compulsive enough to save the original packing from these things. All right, that's it. Hope you enjoyed it. Have a good one.